Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, good. I've had some problems with these earpods. They're being very low, but if you can hear me, that's great.
Perfect. Very okay. Yeah. Thank you so much, Mr. Donaldson.
Thank you. What a wonderful surprise. Thank you so much for including me in this in your podcast. I was watching you know what? Watch this. I'm going to turn it so I don't have to look at myself. Who wants to look at themselves? I wonder if I can. Anyway, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I was watching your interview with Eddie Hamilton and Joe Walker, and
yeah,
it's wonderful to be thought of by you guys.
Thank you. No, it's really for us tonight. I'm lonely because my co-host and friends can't be here, but say hello to you. Yeah, they are very sorry.
Hello to them.
Yeah,
no problem.
Max and Davide.
Have a sip of coffee. I'm sure that won't be. You'll edit that out, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah. Don't worry. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. So kind. Yeah, really.
Oh, my pleasure.
Your work is fantastic. We are super fan of you, and we mean it because yeah, I'm a student of editing, and yeah, I love your work, really. We have particular attention about this section of cinema that is editing, and yeah,
yes,
it's a pleasure to talk with you.
Well, thank you so much for including me. And so, are you still a student, or like an actual student, or more of a lifelong student of editing?
I graduated next week. Yeah.
Oh wow! Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah. And shall we begin?
Yeah. That sounds great. Maybe my wife said it's a very easy thing to do. You don't have to look at yourself. You'll only look at your participants.
Thank you so much again. And yeah, my question is about where you learn to edit. The first question.
I guess I would say that I started to learn to edit at I went to university for film, and you start doing smaller projects, so on and so forth. And I went to a very small school, and so there was a lot of on a certain project you could end up doing 2 or 3 roles. Excuse me. And so that's when I first started to edit. Back in the film school days, when of course you only imagine yourself being a director. Everybody imagines themselves as a director, but I really loved editing my own stuff. In fact, I can remember the very first thing I really spent a long time editing was this project where it was all on VHS tape reels, the end of which I could barely move my wrists because I just obsessively been doing this for days. So that's where I really started to learn. And then because like everybody else, I thought, okay, well, I'm going to be a director. Where's the best place to learn how to be a director beyond, making films? And when you're starting out in the industry, the closest you could get to the action was in editing. I was also very influenced by, Martin Scorsese had worked as an editor, David Lean had worked as an editor, Hal Ashby. It seemed that there was a route to directing via editing. So I thought that was the best place to start. So I began my career working on small films in film editing rooms. And that's where I really learned to edit from the various editors I was working with then. Gradually, then I got on to like super low budget films where they couldn't afford to pay you. But therefore they couldn't afford anybody really good. So they got me, and you just gradually learn through really trial and editor and repetition and just working. And I still say I'm learning how to edit. I mean, it's an incredible mystery, and you're constantly solving incredible puzzles, and you never really learn fully how to do it.
Yeah. And yeah, I see myself in this. I think I'm only at the beginning, but Yeah.
Always at the beginning. You're always at the beginning.
Yeah.
Anytime I think I've gotten 10 feet ahead of the beginning, something comes back to make me humble me and make me realize I really don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. And before that, let's talk about your passion for cinema. When was born?
Okay.
Your passion.
You know, I can still remember sitting in the theater when my mother took me to see Snow White. I tried to figure out when that was. I think I might have been 4 or 5 years old. And I can still remember being terrified and just the sensation. It was in the old days, the big, large theater with big red seats. And I can remember sitting in there and feeling like someone was, like somehow has stuck in my brain. So clearly it made a massive, impact on me. And then, it's funny, the next movie I can remember going to see is Star Wars. I can still remember going in my friend's family's station wagon to go see Star Wars. And that obviously, like for a lot of boys of my generation, just changed everything. So then, I was completely obsessed. That led to Raiders of the Lost Ark, which I was insanely obsessed by. I had a paper route and therefore I had my own money. And so I think I saw it 14 times in the theater, and my parents would be like, you're going again? But, I had a paper route, it was my own money. So, and that eventually, that obsession kind of led to, gradually you become more, quote unquote, sophisticated through high school. I started to see the films of Martin Scorsese and so on and so forth, but you still don't necessarily think that this is something that you're actually able to do. Like this could actually be a life. And then actually it was an Italian film that I had on. It was, I guess the closest thing I would call it to is an epiphany. I went with my friends to see Cinema Paradiso, which for whatever reason, that was the first film where it landed on me that this could be something I could do. Like, I don't know why it was that film. I mean, he was a film director in it, the incredible montage of kisses at the end. But for whatever reason, I was in a certain emotional state when I saw that movie. It dawned on me that I could do this, much to my, at the time, embarrassment, because I was sobbing uncontrollably. And like my friends were like hitting me. And but for whatever reason, a door opened. And through that film, that led to the idea, oh my God, maybe I can actually do this thing I love. And, my friends and I would make little short films for school, for projects. But all of a sudden it dawned on me that this might be something that I can actually do. And so then that led to a much more deeper dive into films and the various, film movements and filmmakers. And, but somehow it all connected back to that moment, watching Snow White with my mother in the theater. That's what started it. And on some level, that's what continues to do it. My son and I, went to go see Top Gun Maverick a few weeks ago and in IMAX, and that overriding thrill of that kind of movie making, or, much more serious films that, that it's all a part of this much sort of emotional landscape of my life. I guess that's the best way to put it. I can't even imagine life without movies.
Yeah, thanks.
And how about you? Like where did you find it?
Yeah, I don't know. I always watch films, and
yeah,
I think my first movie in the cinema is Shrek.
Oh yeah.
Yes. My first, and I was terrified. Same. Yeah. But from that moment, I watch everything. Yeah, always. And talking about movie, last week I watched a movie that you edited, Crimes of the Future, I think.
Oh yes.
You edited. Yeah.
Yes.
And it's amazing. tell me something about the beginning of this project and the edit session, how this go.
Sure. I had worked with the producer of Crimes of the Future, Robert Lantos, on a couple other films in the past. And so when I was contacted by him about this film, David Cronenberg, all over the world, but especially in Canada, is this monumental figure, like the sort of the leading light of the Canadian. I'm based in Toronto, and so the leading light of the Canadian film industry. And is, like a lot of people, I thought David had retired, or at the very least semi-retired. And so the idea that he would make another film again, and that somehow I could be potentially involved, was insane to me. Like, I couldn't believe it. I basically thought to myself, like, well, this will never happen. But the very fact that, they thought of me is like such an astonishing achievement, and I should take great pleasure in that. And I did, never imagining that David and I would actually be in the room with David. And then, things come about, and, so I met with David, and again, like, still, you're like, you're trying to not sound like an idiot and go, oh my God, and then just stare like, oh my God, it's David Cronenberg on the Zoom screen. But, we got along great, and he hired me to do the job, which again, astonishing. And so then, then I had to start managing what was really, okay, now I actually have to do this film. I have to sort of see myself as, certainly not necessarily an equal as David, but his collaborator. Like, I can't just be a fanboy or anything like that, like it's now I have to really step up. And David is a really interesting filmmaker in that he doesn't necessarily like to discuss too much beforehand his expectations of the film, his ideas of the film. When I offered, they were shooting in Greece and I was going to be in Toronto, and when I offered David to say, do you want to watch dailies together? Do you want to see anything? And David said, no, I don't want to watch dailies. I offered to David the possibility of, do you want to watch the dailies together, so on and so forth. And he said, no, and in fact, I'm not going to select any takes, and I don't really want to talk about it with you. Like, I just want your impression of it. I want you to relate to the material as personally and as as you can, without my interference, and then build it from there. Which, of course, at the beginning, I thought, oh my God, like the first couple of days, it's like, and I should also say, David doesn't shoot a tremendous amount of footage. So we're not talking 2 or 3 cameras and multiple setups. He doesn't do a lot of takes. So it's not like I'm wading through hours and hours of material trying to find my way. He's very specific when he's shooting, but certainly in terms of tone and performance, so on and so forth, I was on my own. And at the beginning, it was certainly a bit intimidating, but then I realized very quickly that it was actually a giant blessing, because I think if David was leaving comments or saying, these are my selected takes, or do this, then I think I would have been trying to figure out a code. Do you know what I mean? Like, sort of, what is the code to please David based on these little scraps of information I had? And so, because I had no scraps, I pretty quickly was able to be alone in the room with the footage, and be alone in a way that enabled me to go wherever I felt it was worth going. Before I output for David for the first time, of course, I was in a bit of a panic, like, oh my God, what if I've totally screwed it up? But him giving you that space as a collaborator was incredible, and certainly allowed me to sort of edit it in a way that I wasn't in any way extra intimidated. They're all great performers and you want to rise to the level of the work. But certainly I wasn't in any time trying to track code to try of how do I please my director. Especially because what my director wanted was for me to discover and present it to him.
Yeah. And a question that I made at other editors like you is how do you manage the stress? Because editing is a very stressful, in certain occasion, work. And how did you manage to do this?
I think obviously, over time you develop a greater confidence. And you develop a greater confidence not only in your ability to manage the material, but also your ability to be bad. That sometimes being bad or making choices that you think, well, this is actually could be really terrible. You realize that's actually part of the discovery process. And if you've been around long enough, you start to feel like, okay, I'm not going to get fired today. I might get fired in 2 weeks, but I'm not going to get fired today. So that kind of burgeoning and sort of slowly developing confidence over the course of your career allows you to manage the kind of stress of, does this have to be perfect? I want it to be perfect. You gradually realize that perfect is actually wrong. And if anything, during the assembly process, rather than trying to make it perfect, you should be trying to make it interesting. I think when you start out your career, you think, I think it's kind of a joke, like every editor sort of has this, sort of daydream that the director and the producer are going to come in and go, oh my God. They see your assembly and they go, oh, it's done. Like, release it. And you set that as a goal at the beginning, which I think is nuts, because your assembly is really the only time you have to completely play and be completely experimental and creative, and it should be used as the time to not make the film perfect, but to set off sort of creative fireworks in your collaborators. Like I'd rather go, this doesn't quite work, but it might make you think of something. So therefore, when I'm saying, when I get back to the managing the stress, the more confident you get that you're, as I said, not going to be fired today, maybe in a couple of weeks, but not going to be fired today, then it enables you to kind of just relax and sit in the chair. And obviously, if you have previous relationships with your collaborators, they know you well, so on and so forth. Still, that being said, like working on Crimes of the Future, like as I was about to send a cut to David, you just breathe. You just breathe. Like I remember, about to, outputting it and just kind of trying to catch my breath, like relax. Just relax. Because I do feel that trying to please and being afraid, you're not going to do your best work. You're not going to do work that inspires you or inspires your collaborators. So, and I don't know if you're like this, but part of the editing mindset is that ability to just disappear, the sort of hyper focus on things. And so if you can, allowing yourself to be lost in it is always the greatest stress reducer. Forgetting that you're working on a film or with somebody you've admired your entire life in some way, and just go, I belong here, and I'm just gonna, if I fail, I fail. But I'd rather fail and be interesting than just, deliver some rote edit that doesn't inspire. I'd rather him think I'm crazy than boring. I guess that's the best way to describe it.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, it's a big movie, perfectly edited. Yeah, it's amazing to see it. And I hope to see it on cinema, because in Italy is not released yet. I saw it on digital.
Oh yeah.
On Amazon. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But I want to watch it on big screen and in Italian. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it does. You know, like it's the kind of film that it has a deliberate sort of aesthetic and pace and sort of dramatic temperature that is, you know, like is effective in a cinema in a way that it's you can still access it and still enjoy it. And David is certainly was like, oh, people are just gonna be watching this on their Apple Watch, so it's got to work on an Apple Watch. But you know, I do think, like a Top Gun Maverick, like a Star Wars, you know, that the cinema experience of something like this is really additive.
Yeah. always prefer cinema. Yeah, I am the same opinion.
Yeah.
You are not editing the movie for Apple Watch. I think.
Right. Even though I know that's where many will watch it, or on their phone. You know?
I hope not.
Yeah.
And talking about your previous work, you edit a lot of episodes of Handmaid's Tale.
Yes.
Yeah. Talking about this, about your experience on this.
Sure. I work in Toronto, Canada, which is a smaller city for professional, you know, for the film and television industry. So, you know, you can't necessarily be a pure if you're based entirely and your work is based entirely in a smaller city, in a smaller place. You can't be an entirely just a cinema editor or just this or just this. You know, you get a wide variety of work. So I sort of came up coming through documentary or television or feature films. A TV show like Handmaid's Tale has been, for me, it's the kind of the best of, has been the best of both worlds. It's been an extraordinary experience. In my very first interview with the showrunner, Bruce Miller, he said, "We want you to push it as far as you can take it. And if you go too far, we'll pull you back." And to be told that as an editor is incredible, as any creative is incredible. So from the very moment we started in the first season, I always felt that, okay, how can I push this scene in terms of subjectivity? How can I push this scene in terms of sound? How can I push this scene in terms of music? All of which is asked for and appreciated. So when we started in the first season with our director, Reed Morano, who did the first 3 episodes, she had a very defined aesthetic sense of how she wanted the show to be. Like, her lookbook was astonishing. She had made one feature before, but had previously worked primarily as a director of photography. So her visual sense was incredible. And so once we started working with Reed in the edit, we were all really, myself and the pilot editor was an editor named Julian Clark. And then the other main editor on Handmaid's is a woman named Wendy Hallam Martin, who has become one of my closest collaborators over the years. We've worked together now. And so as we were starting out, we were really attempting to understand how far are we able to push the aesthetic of this show. And certainly in the first season, it was all about subjectivity. And you know, June, the character of June, or Offred, couldn't see the world beyond her bonnet. And how can we accentuate that with music, with the cutting style, without cutting, with hanging in close-up, so on and so forth. It was really a constant attempt to discover a different language for this show itself. And that was really thrilling. To have performances of that caliber, writing of that caliber, and they want you to deliver editing at that caliber in a way that is not expected. You know, certainly any number of their directors on the show, especially in the second and third season, our producing director was Mike Barker, and Mike's feeling was surprise me. I'd much rather come into the editing room and see you put something together in a way I never would have imagined, and and inspires me in a way. So that was, that's an incredible experience. It also places a lot of pressure on you because you feel like, okay, I've got a shot, I've got a oneer and one other close up. How could I make this the most interesting scene? Like, you can't always do that, but to demand that of yourself for an extended period of time was really thrilling. And obviously the show, taking on the cultural significance it did after Trump being elected, so on and so forth, you did feel certainly under more of a microscope, which just, made you want to deliver at an even higher level. And one of the most amazing things about Handmaids for me was working with Wendy, because we became, I certainly became, and we became very open and collaborative, which is one of the great differences between working in television and film, is that in film, and a lot of times it's just yourself and your assistant and the director and the producer, but on a TV series, it's much more of a, the term I would use is family. And Wendy became like my ultimate sounding board, and we would screen scenes for each other and screen all these sorts of things and ask for advice. And having somebody like Wendy who is that good, who is sort of the person collaborating with you on the most basic level, was very inspiring, and they certainly pushed me to do my best work possible, because she would come into the room and I'd say, is this nuts? Is this crap what I've done? And she might say, no, it's not crap, or maybe it is a little crap, but what, have you tried this? And so that for me was one of the great joys of working on Handmaids, and certainly one of the great joys of working in television, a sort of a broader collaborative experience.
Yeah. By the way, I watch it now, Handmaid's Tale, and yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, I like it very much. And let's talking about you talk about that you are an editor of film, cinema, and series TV. Talking about your approach in these two different products, how change this thing?
Well, I think what happens mostly, it all comes down to time. The amount of time you have. Clearly on television, you have a lot less time. So on that level, on film, you have I guess the easy one way I try to describe it is, one is chess and one is speed chess. And in television, your schedules are usually so compacted that it's a lot of instinctual cutting, and you do your best to manufacture perspective. So for example, say if I'm assembling a television series where you're getting a tremendous amount of footage generally, and they're moving much more quickly than on a feature film, I'll try to start my day by, say it's the second day of the edit. The second day of the edit, I'll come in the morning and I'll take a look at what I did the previous day, because I have to sort of shake up, is there something new? Is there something that I didn't realize? So on and so forth. And then I might make some tiny adjustments and so on and so forth. Then I sit down and I watch the dailies from the previous day. And watching dailies is really essential for me, and it's really your first opportunity to you are the first viewer of the film. You're the first viewer of the footage. You're the first person who wasn't there, who wasn't fighting against the light, who didn't have to deal with that complaint, so on and so forth. So you're watching it from a very pure, I guess, maybe, or you have no baggage for the footage. So your first impression of what moves you, what makes you laugh, what feels the most dramatic. That's essential. So then once I finish watching dailies and making my notes, just very rough notes, like funny at this line, so on and so forth. Then I start assembling. And as I'm assembling in television, I realize that I do have to get moving, and I have to move more quickly than I would on a feature film. And so I'm always trying to move forward. I'm being as specific as possible, but I'm trying to move forward as like line to line, performance to performance, building the scene out. Again, purely instinctually. If I get stuck, I try to keep moving, because I know I can come back the next morning and take a look at it and go, oh, that was so obvious. Why didn't I see that? Why did I spend an hour on that last night? It's so obvious right now. So you're constantly kind of manufacturing perspective. So at the end of the, so I also do a lot of versions. So if I have time, I get through one version of the scene and then go, okay, well, now what if they're a little angry? Or what if I hold on this shot way too long? What does it feel like if I'm on this shot way too long? And I just create little versions of all the different scenes, of all the scenes, again, which I watch the next day. So in a feature film, it's very similar to that. It's just you have a lot more time. And so I do tend to get, well, maybe I can spend an hour getting lost down this train, down this path that I might not be able to get back from. So that's certainly what I'm doing when I'm assembling. I'm just trying to discover it. I think in preparation for a scene or a show or anything, I do read the scripts quite a bit and spend as much time as I can digesting the scripts and understanding the scripts and feeling like I have a larger sense of the whole. But while I'm assembling, I actually don't look at the script because now it's not a script. The footage is gonna tell me how to get through the scene. And if I'm looking for the material to reflect the script, then I'm not allowing the footage to have the true its true potential, I guess is the best way to put it. So what I'll do is I'll put together an entire scene, and when I'm pretty confident it's playing the way I want it to play, then I'll go back and look at the script and go, oh my God, I totally missed that. Or, oh, they didn't do that. Or, oh, they dropped that on the day. Wonder why they dropped that. Because again, your job is to build the show or the film, not to represent the script. And so many amazing things happen on the floor that if you're just trying to fit it into what the script is, solely trying to do that, you're missing out on the potential of what they shot. And then the other thing I would say, between something that is say David's film, versus, I don't know if Handmaid's Tale is actually a great example, or say more conventional television, is that I think that in cinema editing, you're trying to create some kind of middle space between the screen and the viewer. Like, I think that in cinema, you need to create something that the viewer can inhabit. Like, it's difficult to describe, but it's almost like on television, things are expected to come at the audience to sort of arrive where the audience is, for the most part in television. So it's more dialogue driven. The storytelling is generally more straightforward and plot oriented. Whereas in cinema, I think, especially the cinema I'm really drawn to, there is more space for the audience to come to the image itself. Does that make sense? Like in television,
absolutely,
the image comes to the audience, and I think in cinema, you come to the image. And so finding that perfect balance between exposition and mystery is a different calculation in film, and certainly in Crimes of the Future. You know, if anything, what we were doing at the beginning, we're dropping some scenes that gave more context. You know, a filmmaker like David, you know, you have to assume the audience knows his work and is going to feel like, you know, this is going to make sense in its own way. It doesn't need to make sense perfectly clearly from the first moment of the film. So we ended up dropping some material early in the film that sort of gave things just a little bit more context. And certainly as David and I were working together, we were, okay, can we take this whole section out? What if we take this bit of exposition out? Is it too much? You know, like, are people too confused? But of course, the amazing thing is David also doesn't really screen the film. So it wasn't like we were doing test screenings and having people going, oh, I don't understand this. That's not how David works. It's really a matter of how do we feel with the amount of exposition that's going on. Yeah, I remember when we screened it for our title designer, Justin Stevenson, he was one of the first people to see it who had never read the script. And, you know, we said, do you feel lost? Like, how are you doing? And he's like, oh, at times I feel a little lost, but that's okay. Because I trust David's going to explain this to me, or at least give me enough context in a sense for me to explain it to myself. And that kind of trust in the audience generally is not what television series are like. Yeah. So, you know, and David is very interested in the audience, but he's not interested in pandering to the audience or explaining to the audience. And certainly he knows that his audience doesn't want to be pandered to or have things explained to them. So, you know, when people talk about, oh, you know, there's all these walkouts at Cannes and, you know, all the, you know, or people walking out in the film zone and so forth, David understands that could potentially happen. He's not making films for a general audience. So you're not trying to edit the film for a general audience. You're definitely editing the film knowing that you're just trying to build a complete, and certainly in David's case, singular world that doesn't necessarily reveal itself all at once, but that will hopefully grow in the audience's mind throughout the film. And then hopefully once the movie's over too, when they're left thinking about it, the images, the narrative, the characters, whichever.
Because it's really interesting because the feel when you watch the movie, particular this is exactly this. You watch it, but this wait a minute, and you thinking about this all the day, and maybe mean this, maybe for me it is this. And it's really interesting to do this kind of mental castle on the movie. And
you know, even Francesco, when David and I are collaborating, like say the ending of the film, you know, I have my sense of what the ending means, and David has his own, but that was not something we ever discussed. We never went, this is exactly what is happening in this moment. It was obviously a moment of transcendence, whether the Saul Tenser character is dying or is reaching his evolutionary fulfillment by eating the bar. That's not necessarily something that we discussed, because I think David's feeling is it's there for the audience to decide. It's there for the audience to take away. And that's great. You know, because certainly I've had the experience of, especially if you're working on more conventional television series, where you're adding everything you can to make the narrative sort of as unambiguous as possible.
And maybe you have a first assembly with more explanation, more you have it more length about the movie, more context maybe, and but for me it functions perfectly. It's don't answer too much. Stay to you to understand, and you watch it for this.
No, I had a great conversation with a collaborator on a different project, Craig, where when he saw the film, he was saying that there's such a disconnect between, what in the surgery scenes, the characters are not having the reaction to the surgery that I am having. And so to them, it's very sensual. It's very, it's erotic. It's, as the Timlin character says, surgery is the new sex. So as an audience member, that disconnect is part of the process of watching the film. He's like, I was never grossed out, even though I probably, if it was real life, I would have been grossed out, but the characters weren't in any way grossed out. So certainly in putting the film together, you're doing your best to make the world of the film itself make perfect sense to the characters. It's certainly in a film like David's, it's up for the audience to catch up to the characters, whether and hopefully they choose to. And certainly I think in the instances where people walk out, that's where they go, no, I can't. I can only have my response to this film, not necessarily the response the characters are having to it.
And talking about freedom, how is important the freedom that you have artistically talking about your editing? How is important for you?
Well, I think that as an editor, you're a part of a collaborative chain, and so the freedom, I associate freedom with the opportunity to be as I don't know if unique is the right term, but to push myself and my craft as far as I can possibly go. And that's the assembly stage for me. But it's also it's a collaborative environment. So freedom is also when you share that with your director or whoever, and they say, "Oh, I love this, but can we change this?" Freedom changes to a collaborative relationship. And I think one of the most important things as any creative is to take the ego out of what you're doing and to take and to be open at all times to the possibilities. The moments in my career where I feel the most ridiculous or stupid are instances where I can very clearly went, well, I was being defensive, or I was not open to a different creative idea. A good example I would use is there's an episode in the second season of *Handmaid's Tale* where there's a terrible rape of June, where Fred Waterford and Serena, it's in episode 10, and they rape her in order to bring on her to hopefully bring on her her delivery. And in the original script, there was this voiceover that was that June is supposed to be reciting this voiceover, and we wouldn't get Elizabeth Moss's voiceover until generally later in the process, sometimes during this shoot, but generally, especially later in the season, because she's extraordinarily busy, we would usually get it later in the process. So I put the scene together using a temp narration that we had, and I was like, this is crazy. Like, this is never going to work, because the scene itself was astonishingly powerful. And so when I started working with the director, Jeremy Perezua, I very, very confidently said, well, this will, we don't even need to bother with the voiceover. It's never going to work. And Jeremy, said, no, we should probably try it. Lizzie recorded it. And I was so dismissive. I was like, this is never going to work. Like, it just detracts. And then as soon as we put the voiceover up, it was incredible. And Lizzie doesn't record them. she would record them onto her phone, just looking at the script. She wasn't looking at images or anything. These are just temp narrations. And it was so incredibly powerful with this voiceover that I had dismissed in my confidence. I mean, I was really actually kind of really embarrassed. And I remember saying to Jeremy, like, I haven't done that. You know, I hadn't done something like that. Like, oh, that won't work in years. And yet here I had done it and I was so wrong. And so the freedom to do what I do sort of comes out of a total openness. And it's an openness to all your ideas, whether you think this is ridiculous or not, and open to all your collaborators' ideas. Because great ideas come from assistants, they come from other editors, they come from producers, they come from directors. And freedom for me is making the editing process as open and collaborative and ego-free as possible. That's freedom. Like, I don't expect anything I do to stick. Like for somebody, and you know, somebody like David is great. David does not approach the edit in an neurotic way in any shape or form. He doesn't look at things and go, let's look at this, let's look at this, oh, let's try this. I know we looked at this, but let's look at it again. That's just not how he approaches the material. If he likes it, it's done. If he doesn't, we'll work on it. And so therefore, you know, working with him, more stuff that I would consider, you know, like, you know, stuff would go through and it's like, well, David, let's go back and work on this. Let's go back. And he's like, no, I like it. You know, and they say, oh, well, after you left yesterday, I did another version, and he'd watch it and go, oh, no, I like it. I like it how you have it, you know? Yeah. So I was a little bit surprised in that. I would figure there'd be more tearing things apart, so on and so forth, sometimes, than there was. So yeah, to circle back and try to finish off the answer to your question. Total, I think creative freedom is collaboration and without ego. And I'm more than happy to tear anything apart that I thought was great, because you never know where the next great thing is, and you don't know where your great idea is going to come from. And so that's the freedom I aspire to anyway.
Yeah, I think the same, and I think that sometimes it's really difficult to put aside, and yeah, I'm open to this, but yeah, it's always the winning choice. Sure. A director that you want to collaborate with you?
Oh God, that's impossible. You know, like the films that have really sort of moved me over the last number of years are all, you know, they're all very different, but they're all sort of, I guess the best way to describe them are singular voices. Like, yeah. I love Paolo Sorrentino. Like, I love his films. They're so musical and visual and emotional, and you know, so I look at his stuff and I think, oh my God, like that's, you know, like that is an artist I would love to work with. You know, when you say that, it also makes you incredibly self-conscious, because they have established creative relationships. So it's sort of like saying, is there anybody's, you know, it's like marriages, you know, so it's a weird thing. So I say that only in terms of, I guess the best way to describe it is who are the filmmakers that are inspiring you the most these days. So Paolo Sorrentino for sure. I absolutely love Cuarón's films. And I love Chloe Zhao's films. I'd love to do a film with Reed Morano, who I worked on with Handmaid's Tale. I love the films of Mike Mills. You know, these are, and, you know, Paul Thomas Anderson. I could just, you know, bore you and myself. And I think what feels intangible, or what feels connective in all of those things are they're singular. Yeah. They're filmmakers who have a very specific aesthetic and also emotional approach to their films, and which is why, again, working with David Cronenberg was so astonishing, because he is truly a singular filmmaker. And what was so inspiring about that was just how inclusive a collaborative vision he has, and yet his films are so singular. I think we all have this mythology of, you know, artists, great artists being the type of people who just, this is it, and this is my vision, and no one contributes to it, and you know, and it has been entirely my experience that the great artists aren't like that. You know, David was not like that at all. I just finished a film with Sarah Polley, the second film I've done with Sarah, and that same thing. She's an incredibly generous collaborator, and certainly film. That's what I think makes the best work. It's the contribution of so many different people at so many different stages of their career and levels of collaboration, and that's when it's really magic.
When collaborate, everyone is the best. It's always the best.
Absolutely.
Not only person made a movie, a lot of person made a movie, I think.
Absolutely. No, and I just think it's so much easier for somebody to say, well, the director did this, and that's the director's film. When, you know, I think great artists and great directors know, no, it's a collaborative process.
It's beautiful to me because editing is always put aside, editors in the dark room with but you know, it's not true. Like this. There is,
and it's so hard to know what editors do, you know, like on any project, like which is why I think a lot of times editing awards go to very flashy editing action films, because you can see that's obvious, as opposed, you know, and totally deserving too. But you know, your editing is also managing, we ran out of light in the scene, we don't have enough coverage, or the actor was really off their game that day, and you have to somehow make it a performance that is a good performance, as opposed to they were tired, they were you know, whatever. So much of what an editor does, job to job, film to film, is a bit of a mystery. But that's also why I love it. You know, like I love fast editing, I love slow editing, I love, you know, like it's such an incredible thing. And it's hard to tell what an editor does. You know, like a DOP, you look at it and go, man, what a shot. And that's what the director of photography did in collaboration with the director and his crew. Editing, you never know. So
it's true.
So so it's hard to write about.
It's amazing talking with person that do this job, and talking with you, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much again, really, for your time.
Thank you, Francesco. I really appreciate it. I like it. It was a wonderful surprise, and hopefully, you know, I didn't say too many ridiculous things. And hopefully, you know, do you know what your plan is now that you're graduating? Are you going to start assisting, or how do you? What's your next step?
I hope. I'm living in Milan, near Milan, and I hope to find a little place on maybe TV or spot. In Milan, there are a lot of fashion and advertising. We hope.
Well, you know, good luck, you know, and certainly my advice would be, do everything, cut everything you can. You never know what job is going to be the one that leads to the next job and the next great opportunity. You know, like I can put direct links between, this job is a bit silly, to that led to something incredible. You never know where it's going to come from. So, you know, good luck, you know.
Thank you.
You know, but you're obviously driven and interested in the art of editing. So that's going to go a long way for you.
Thank you so much. Really. Thank you for your time. Have a good day.
Thank you, Francesco. You too.
An amazing conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good night.
Good night.